What's up, everybody? Taking a little walk to a little open space that's near where I live. So I just come out here in the mornings because it's a quick walk and I can get some fresh air before starting my work day. It's been a little while since I posted anything. I'm sorry about leaving you guys hanging, but it's been a busy few weeks for me. Just getting back into the swing of recording. I've wanted to cover this particular topic today for some time. Let's get to it. What we've covered already was wanting to get 1% better and understanding that getting 1% better is difficult to achieve because of a forging cycle. So today we're going to talk about ways that we can accelerate the forging cycle so we can stay on top of our goal of getting 1% better every day. Let me tell you guys a story. It's not necessarily one that I wanted to share, but I think it's one that's worth sharing, and I've been keeping this in my back pocket, so we may as well go for it. This is the story of my very first elk hunt I ever did. I got invited by actually a really good buddy of mine. He had another group of people that he had been going with, and in fairness, they'd only been going for, I think, maybe a couple of years before they invited me to come along with their group. So everybody was, kind of relatively new to it. I'd come out of whitetail hunting, so I figured, sure, I want to give this elk hunting thing a try. I live in Colorado. It's past due that I give elk hunting a try. We had a couple kind of preliminary planning meetings leading up to the draw out here. So we'd show up to Starbucks, and they already had maps laid out, had a unit picked out. I think even the trail that we were going to hike in on, they already had that picked out, and this was mostly just kind of a planning thing, like, oh, hey, bring this, bring that, we don't want to forget this, and we'll hike up on this day and do this. And we kind of figured out which dates we wanted to put in for the draw. Being brand new to it, I mostly just listened and went along with whatever everyone else said, and so I showed up there a day before opening day. We knew we wanted to hike in a ways so we could get a head start on opening day. So we started hiking in. And that would have probably been my first indication that something was wrong, because about halfway up the trail, everything got really muddy, and we could see lots of hoof prints. Got a ways in, got up some altitude, got in some miles, and started setting up a camp. There was already quite a significant camp that was being set up by people down at the trailhead, but we were the only ones who were up the trail, so we felt pretty good about our situation. And we woke up before dawn. It was interesting because we had drawn first season tags, but it was already quite cold. It was below zero. So we started hiking. I was going up with my friend Brian. Our goal was to get to this meadow that we could see on the map. We're pushing up through. This was pushing off trail. There's no trails going up there, so we're just pushing through backcountry, snapping twigs and all sorts of stuff. And probably every elk within half a mile knew where we were. But we're pushing through in the cold and in the dark, trying to get to this meadow, and eventually we do. The one thing that I'll say grabbed me out of this whole experience was the beauty of it, because it was just a spectacular scene in this meadow. Just everything was covered, because it was so cold, everything was just covered with hoarfrost, just everything. Every little blade of grass, every pine needle on the trees, every branch, just everything was frosted over. And we had this amazing kind of panoramic scene around this alpine meadow where there was a grove of aspens off to one side. You could look up and see everything surrounded by the pine trees and the frost, and it was just amazing. Brian headed over to that little aspen grove, and I decided I was going to try to make it to the top of the meadow. And there was kind of a drop there that went down to a creek that was still running, that was nearby, and so I wanted to have a look over the creek. And there was this one point in the morning where the sun came up and was getting bright enough where it was melting the frost, and all of a sudden everything in this valley became little diamonds, little beads of melting frost, before it started evaporating and going up in the atmosphere. It was just covered with all these little droplets of water, and since the sun was shining straight on them, it was just diamonds just glittering everywhere, and it was really incredible. It's amazing to sit there and watch. What wasn't amazing was the amount of sign that we were finding in this meadow. I found a trail going down to that creek that looked like it was used by well, some kind of ungulates, probably elk, but there wasn't any fresh sign there. And as the day opened up, we started hearing gunshots from way up the mountainside. And that was a little bit discouraging. And we were thinking, well, maybe, whoever's hunting up there might move the elk around and they might come down to us. But it started getting on towards afternoon. I was getting hungry and I was exhausted. And we came back to camp, and then the really discouraging thing started happening, because there was horses going by on the trail, and that they were the ones that had been making the trail muddy. There was just, I think, probably 2 or 3 horse groups that went by us at that time, and so they were just going straight up the mountainside, and we knew they could cover a lot more ground than we were going to be able to cover. And they were sort of waving to us and grinning as they went by. And then some more bad news came in. One of the guys had a satellite phone, and he was in contact with his wife, and there was a cold front coming in. We knew this when we had left, but apparently the forecast kept getting worse and worse, and they were predicting below zero temperatures, quite a bit of snow moving in. And since we had only planned to hunt for the weekend, that was pretty much it. Like, we were going to be cold and snowy the rest of the weekend. So by that point, we were kind of beat, and we knew it. So we packed up our camp and we hiked down to the trucks. And it's kind of laughable for me to think about it now that was our elk hunt, because I haven't even been elk hunting for that long. And I can already say that there were so many things that I know I was doing wrong on this hunt. And I've learned a lot in the years since I've been going out since then. And I still certainly don't know everything there is to know about this elk hunting thing. But the main thing that I was doing wrong, and this has been one of the major learning experiences of my life, and this is going to be the number one thing where if you want to accelerate a foraging cycle and anything that you want to do, be it elk hunting, be it your professional endeavors, your personal relationships, because I use this with everything. Actually, I learned this from my business experiences, and I've been applying it to hunting. I apply it to all my personal relationships. Pretty much anything that I'm endeavoring to do, this is the number one thing where I would say you're probably going to get 80% of your results from out of everything I'm going to say today. So the best thing that you can do is ask questions. And that sounds really simple. In fact, it's deceivingly simple, because we think we've been asking questions our whole life. Asking questions is really an art form, and it probably really deserves its own video series, and I'll probably start getting into that at some point. That's not really the point of this video, but there's a lot of nuances to it and a lot of details. It's not really so simple as just saying, ask some questions. It's like, in a way, it's like boxing, right? So boxing, depending on who you ask, has a handful of rules of where you can't hit, and it has anywhere between 4 to 8 punches that you can throw, right? Depending on who's counting. If you're an old school guy and you only count 1, 2, 3, 4, if you're not counting overhand rights and stuff like that. Anyways, 4 to 8 punches. That's an unbelievably simple martial art in terms of the structure. A few rules, 8 punches, right? But if you've ever boxed before, it's an unbelievably complex martial art to practice, because the structure is so simple. Everything comes down to the nuances, right? It's the same thing with asking questions. All you're doing is asking something, right? But there's so many nuanced ways that you can structure your questions, that you can ask, the way you phrase things. It really deserves a video series of its own, and I'll get into that at some point. But that's the number one thing that I've got to reiterate to you guys, is asking questions. When I think back on these elk hunting meetings that I was going to, And I mostly just listened and figured, these other guys have been out there doing this before me. They, probably know what they're doing. And there was tons of questions that I should have been asking. And even when I was out in the field, there was tons of questions that I should have been asking myself out there in the field. And I'm not saying that could have led me to success on day one, opening season of my very first elk hunt ever. But I would have probably gotten more value out of that experience if I had been asking questions. The second one I call working to learn. And it's something that I took out of my professional endeavors when I got advice when I was first starting to get into the business world. Many people might look at a job as just a way of earning a paycheck, whereas the advice that I got was get jobs where you're going to learn the things that you want to learn so you can go to the next job, take away things from that job, you can go to the next job, take away things from that job, you can go, so eventually you work your way into the job that you really want, the situation that you really want. This is just a way to phrase it for your professional endeavors, but this can apply to anything. This can apply to hunting. Like if you view it as, I'm not hunting to take away meat or to take away a trophy. I'm hunting to learn, right? I'm hunting to improve myself, my skill sets, like my hunting skill sets, my personal skill sets, my personal philosophies, all that stuff, right? If you look at it as a learning process instead of a hunting process, you're going to get a lot more out of your experiences than if you just go out there and hope to take away some meat or to take away a nice rack of antlers, etc. It applies to everything. It applies to your personal relationships. If you look at a dating relationship, for example, like I'm in this so that I can fall in love and I can get married, right? Well, that's one way to approach it. Another way to approach it is I'm here to learn as much as I can about this person, about myself, about falling in love, about all these things. You're probably going to soak up a lot more from that experience of dating than you would if you're just approaching it with this end goal of, well, I'm going to eventually get married, let's say, as an example. So it's working to learn instead of working to earn. But that applies to basically all endeavors of life. So that's going to lead into the next point that I have for you, which is leveraging knowledge. And that goes hand in hand with the one I just said before. If you have one bit of knowledge, you can use that knowledge to get you to the next bit of knowledge. There's a famous quote from this Japanese swordsman Miyamoto Musashi, which says, from one thing, know 10,000 things. And it's exactly encapsulates this concept of leveraging knowledge. What your current knowledge base is right now, you use to build your knowledge base and keep growing your understanding of yourself, the world around you. And the next one I have on the list here is understanding philosophies that are going to guide you towards more success. For me, personally, I'm a Christian, and having a belief in something greater than myself is always reassuring for me. When you're going through that obstacle phase of the foraging cycle, having a belief that there's something greater than what I'm going through, it's a source for me of reassurance and a lot of peace. But that's not the only useful philosophy that I've been able to incorporate into my life. Another big one is the philosophy of Stoicism. There's an audio version of a really cool book that breaks down Stoicism for modern readers. It's called The Obstacle is the Way, and they use the same terminology for obstacles that I do in my foraging cycle, and it presents a really great mentality for the type of mindset you can have when approaching these obstacles. I'd say Zen Buddhism is another one, and Taoism from more Eastern philosophies. They're also they also have a lot of very good mentality for approaching obstacles or approaching difficult things that you'll experience in your life, whatever it is that you're endeavoring to do. So informing yourself of these things and understanding what other people who have lived before you have come up with as far as solutions for how to approach things in life, it's only going to benefit you as you go through your foraging cycles and you're trying to accomplish things that you want to do. The next one I'm going to call problem orientation. And this is going to be different from the way maybe many people view trying to overcome obstacles or trying to achieve things. Typically, people will approach things with a goal orientation of like, here's what I want to do. I want to hunt this elk or this deer. I want to catch this, fish, sturgeon, trout, pelagics, what have you. But the goal is you want to get this thing, and all the effort and all the focus is oriented towards getting that thing. Whereas for me, I find it more useful to be oriented around problems, as in what problems are there out there and which problems do I want to solve, right? So if you break it down for yourself in that way, when the problems arise, you're going to be more mentally prepared, and it's not going to be as disruptive once they actually arise, because you're going to have anticipated that problems are going to happen, right? It's not going to be disrupting you. It's going to be just part of the natural flow of the thing you're trying to do. Like, for example, my elk hunt. If I could have been oriented around problems, like, here's where the other hunters are likely to be. What if the other hunters have better access to this unit than we do, like with the horses, for example? What if it snows? What if there's difficult topography? How are we going to navigate in the dark? Because the dark's going to be an obstacle. If I start orienting myself around problems, then, for one, when the problems happen, it's not going to be as disruptive. I'm already going to be prepared for it. Mentally, I'm already going to anticipate that there's problems, right? For two, because I've anticipated there's going to be problems, I've set myself up to start overcoming those problems before they even arise. So you're setting yourself up to experience a higher level of success and actually get closer to that goal that you're trying to achieve, because you anticipated the problems that you're going to have on the way. Whereas if you're just focused on the goal, then the problems that show up, they start interfering with your goal and you start getting frustrated. The next one is leveraging the power of people like coaches, mentors, consultants, in a certain sense. There's some nuanced differences between those. Typically a consultant is somebody who's, professional and gives you specific advice about something, whereas a coach is somebody who's more, trying to enable you and empower you to do the things that you're trying to do. So there's kind of some nuances between these various things, but you can leverage the power of those to your benefit. Like, the easy one, since we're talking about hunting, let's say like a hunting guide. That's an example of consultant. Maybe they could be a coach, but they're more of a consulting role. They're giving you specific advice about what it is you want to achieve. But that applies to everything. Again, we're not just talking about hunting here. We're talking about anything that you're trying to achieve in life. And you can find consultants for pretty much anything. And specifically, if you're encountering recurring problems with one particular thing, it may be worthwhile to just pay the money for somebody to give you the advice on how to overcome that, versus running into this over and over and over again and trying to deal with it yourself. The next one I'll talk about is humility, because typically if you're going to do any of these things, if you're going to ask somebody for advice, or if you're going to anticipate problems, or if you're going to ask questions, which is the big one, you're going to have to approach this with a mentality of humility, because you're having to admit that you don't know something. And many people, and particularly guys, I should say, it's hard to maintain that level of humility. Most people don't like to admit that they don't know something, right? We want to present ourselves in a way that we know everything and we're experts at everything and we do everything the best, right? But if you're maintaining that type of an attitude, think of the value that you're leaving on the table, like the questions that you're going to leave unasked, the advice that you're not going to get, the mistakes that you're going to keep repeating, because you don't have a humble attitude. Now, humble doesn't mean like you have to think less of yourself, right? Like, humble doesn't mean like you have to lack confidence or something of that nature. In fact, it's easier to have an attitude of humility if you have self-confidence. To maintain that attitude of, I don't know this right now, but I do want to know it and I'm willing to ask questions about it. To me, that shows more confidence than just pretending like you know everything. But let's wrap this up, guys, because I started this by saying that asking questions was the number one thing where you're going to get your most value. And the reason I'm saying that is because questions are going to apply to all these other things that I just said. Like, you're going to have to ask yourself what the best philosophies are. And as you're researching the best philosophies, you're going to have to ask yourself, okay, what is this really telling me? How do I apply this to my life, in order to get the most value out of that? if you're going to hire a consultant, or if you're going to find a mentor or a coach, you're going to have to ask yourself questions about who the best people are to fit that role. And once you have them, you're going to have to ask them questions about what it is you need to do. If you're going to be leveraging your knowledge, or if you're going to be working to learn, you're going to have to ask yourself what it is that you want to learn. And then as you're working, you're going to have to ask yourself things about what you're doing in that process in order that you could leverage it and make it better. So asking questions applies to like everything from the largest concepts all the way down to the smallest concepts, the fine details of what you do every day, day in and day out. So that's why I say, and it's almost hard to overstate how important it is asking questions and asking good quality questions. It's really an art form, and it's not so easy as it sounds. It's often a very difficult thing to do. So I'll probably do future videos on that topic. It's probably going to be a recurring thing here on this channel as I'm going forward. And I'm going to try to show over the course of the other content that I put out how I ask questions and how I try to use those answers to get me to more questions, to get me to more questions, to get me more, and eventually, hopefully, getting the results that I'm trying to achieve. So that's what I've got for you guys today. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for being patient. I know it's been a little bit since I put out some content. Feel free to like and subscribe. If you know somebody you think might benefit from this, feel free to send this video their way. Hopefully you guys have a great day, and we'll see you next time.